Welcome to Feminine Power Time, where wisdom, leadership, and well-being meet. And welcome to episode 5 of 9 in this special season 8.5, the Season of Light. I'm Jennifer Alexander, co-curator and guest host for this season, which is running in June, July, and August. But whenever you're listening, trust that you're receiving this in the perfect season for you. If you're new here to Feminine Power Time, welcome. We're so glad you found us. And if you've been tuning into the podcast for months, years, even the almost decade that Christine has been sharing wisdom here, thank you for coming back week after week to be in this conversation. It's been such a pleasure and a deep honor to be here with you all and with Christine during this season of light, as we're in this real-time experiment of the feminine practices of co-creation and grafting, holding space here on the podcast for us to gather during this season to stay light. And a quick reminder, what is staying light? Well, it means to stay centered, calm, and clear, to be radiant, resilient, and rooted, even in the midst of the swirl of the outside world. It is not about spiritual bypassing, but instead it's a way of living and utilizing our practices in order to come back to our light, even when we get the wobbles. And trust me, we all get the wobbles. We're human, and we're having a human experience on this beautiful planet Earth. So this isn't about being perfect or maintaining some high level of vibrational consciousness all the time. It's really about being human, having emotions, having thoughts, and seeing them in order to transform them and elevate from wherever we are, so that we can show up differently as leaders in our own lives, in how we use our voices, our choices, and our presence in responding to life as it unfolds. So today, we're tuning into wisdom for staying light through the lens of staying sane in an insane world. And it does feel pretty insane out there right now, doesn't it? And that's because we're in the middle. We're in the messy, dark middle of a threshold crossing, and we're riding these waves of transformation. And within this collective wave of transformation, we're also riding our individual currents of transformation. So if you think about a wave at the ocean as it's coming onto the shore, it's not just one big current, it's actually a collection of movements, swirling and churning and ebbing and flowing until it finally reaches the crescendo with a crash and then a brief period of calm. And then the next one comes. Does anyone else feel like that's what life feels like these days? We're in the ocean and it's choppy, rough seas, and good news, there are ways to navigate it. There is a way through, but we have to go through. There's no sailing around this one. It's just too vast. And if we did somehow sail around it, well, guess what? We wouldn't be transformed by it. So here we are, in the midst of the storm together, the insane world. How do we stay sane? Well, we've got some practices for you, 4 actually, and these are simple and they're fun and they bring lightness. And that's what this whole season is about, staying light. So I invite you to pour yourself a mug or a glass of your favorite beverage and just imagine that you and me and Christine are sitting on her back porch in the afternoon sunshine with the lush green trees all around us and we're conversating. Because that's what feminine power time is. It's an intimate conversation between wise beings so that we can all access and receive the wisdom we need to stay light in our current times. So come on over, pull up an Adirondack chair and join us. Here's Christine.
Welcome to Feminine Power Time. This is Christine Arilo, your host, and today this episode is focused on 4 practices, very practical things that you can do in your life right now to stay sane. And I'm going to define for you today actually what the word sane really means. You're going to like, I don't know what you're going to do, but you're going to be like, wow, that's what sane means. Because I'm all about the words here and getting to the root. We're all about the root and getting to the root. So before we jump into what these 4 practices are, and I have been thinking a lot about these and kind of mulling and moodling over this next series for the last couple days, which is also something that is a practice of before we feel that creativity coming up and emerging, before we have some kind of clarity. The rule in feminine leadership is allow the words that I speak to be worthy of the silence I break. So I do try to come here and be here with you all for Feminine Power Time weekly-ish. And maybe like many of you, I have been having my own kind of ups and downs and topsy-turvies. And thank God for all of my practices, because if I didn't have them, I don't think I would be sane. It would be much harder to stay sane and centered and clear and focused. And that's why we have the practices. That's why I come here weekly-ish with you. So I have been going through my own parts and pieces with that, and I'm on the other side, and I'll tell you more about that next week. There's also another great leadership wisdom teaching that says, never tell your stories when you're still bleeding from the stage. I know that's kind of gory. I would actually say, from more of a wisdom perspective, never feel like you have to tell your story till you feel like you've given it to yourself. And in this world that is so oversaturated with social media and needing to, to share everything right now, and sometimes it feels like people feel like they have to live their lives like soap operas and share everything. It's just not how the feminine works. The feminine has a mystery to her. She has a sacredness to her. And all of the great true spiritual teachers, everyone that I've ever studied with, they live this graceful way where they know that the words that they speak matter. And so I'm just sharing that with you all because it is one of my deep practices that I never really talk about, that I give myself the space to have my own internal process before I share it with all of you, or I write about it, or I do a video on it, or whatever. And you're the first usually to know, because this is me and you and all the other people who are tuning in Feminine Power Time. To me, I feel like this is a community of women and beings and men and souls out there who are willing to do things differently. There are those of us that know that we the ways that things have been working for a long time haven't been working. And yet that doesn't mean that it's not challenging. That doesn't mean that it's not hard. That doesn't mean that we don't have our human experiences as well as the experiences that come from that higher consciousness. And we need space to be both. We need space to be both human and also to be those higher consciousness beings. Need space to emote and vent and have our emotions so that we can find our deeper feelings and our deeper truth, so that we can then press the elevate button and then respond and act from there. And anyone that tells us different isn't really being truthful, I believe, to what it means to be human. And that isn't it, part of the challenge that we're facing right now on this planet? We've forgotten as a culture what it means to be humankind. We have forgotten as a culture that humans are part of the natural world. The natural world isn't separate than us. We've forgotten as humans that we actually really depend on each other. It's not survival of the fittest. It's a survival based on collaboration and cooperation. And so much more to talk about that. But I'm going to take a sip. I have my bubbly water here. I'm just going to take a little bubbly water. Do you have one of those little bubbly making machines? Lee gave me one of those for solstice this last year, and I love it because I have this plastic recycling bottle thing. I will not buy things in plastic, and I love bubbly water. And then glass doesn't really get recycled either, and so there's only so many candles Noah can make out of glass. And so she bought me the bubble maker, and I just love it. It makes me so happy. So without further ado, let's talk about these practices. But let's start first with the word insane and sane. Okay, so this is all about how do you and I stay sane in an insane world. And so here's what the word sane means. This is the regular definition: sound, healthy mind, sound judgment, healthy, and now get this, free from mental disturbance. Just think about that for a moment. In what ways have you felt mentally disturbed in the last couple weeks, in the last few months? And remember, when we talk about burnout or we talk about stress, we talk about the whole human system, right? So there's mental, there's emotional, there is physical, and there is spirit. And spirit doesn't have anything to do with religion. It's like that those wings that we have, that spirit, that passion in us. And so just thinking about that, we're focusing and it could be even mental, and let's go ahead and put emotional disturbance in there. And so mental and emotional disturbance, it shows up as confusion, doubt, impulsive choices, or choices where you freeze and you can't make a choice. You're just back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And so just thinking about that, or mental disturbance where you can't fall asleep at night, or you're ruminating on something that just kind of, as they say, gets into your craw, right? And there's a lot for that to happen. I know when I was down in California, I was watching some transformational teachers and different philosophers and people in the medical profession going at each other. And well, actually, one or two people were going at a certain number of people. And it was disturbing to me. It was disturbing to me mentally, it was disturbing to me emotionally, and it was disturbing to me spiritually speaking, because the spiritual disturbance was more like, wow, what is happening in the collective right now that would cause these people, or cause people that are usually pretty centered and heart-based and compassionate, to go insane on another person, to really let loose and create disturbance and interference in the system. And there's ways for us to be in conflict. There's ways for us to have differences. There's ways for us to do all of those things. And right now, as a society, we're kind of sucking at it, don't you think? And it's not something we were taught how to do. What I want to do for all of us today is like, all right, these disturbances are happening in the field. And I use the practices that I'm about to share with you. That disturbance that came in as I watched a person who I actually know personally very well attack a person who I don't know super well, but I know people that person knows. And to watch one person just go at someone with such intensity and anger and judgment, and the other person respond in a way that actually neutralized the field. Um, didn't sidestep it, didn't spiritually bypass it. And it was really interesting to watch and as an observer, but it disturbed me, as I mentioned, at a couple different levels. Now, it didn't get stuck in my craw. What it did is it allowed me to take a step back and be like, what is going on here? What is the bigger picture that's happening here? And it caused me to put on what I call my wise woman spectacles and take a look at it. But then I could ask myself, okay, how do I want to respond to this? I'm not going to jump into that hornet's nest over there, because if I do that, all that's going to happen is I'll just become part of the crazy field and the insane field, where nothing really gets solved. It's just more frenzy happens, more fragmentation happens. Do you all know what I'm talking about? Have you been seeing this and feeling it? And some of us, it's happening in our families. Some of it's happening in our individual relationships, our teams. We're seeing it all the time on the news. And it's like, that's a field of energy. And the practice that we need at this time to stay sane and to add to sanity instead of insanity is to be able to stop and pause and say, how do I want to respond to this? And so these tools practices that I'm going to share with you here, they are part of the answer of what to do, because you have to do something with the energy, and you have to acknowledge I'm a freaking human being and I can't just mentally think myself out of this, but I also, or myself out of this. Although chanting, by the way, BTW, very good practice. I'm currently in a 40-day practice that has been, life-saning me for sure. Is that a new word instead of life-saving? Life-saning? I like that. That's a good word, don't you all think? Sorry, I'm so thirsty today. So but water is actually part of this. And we'll talk more about that next week, about water and how essential it is. So let's jump in. Oh, get this, the root of sanity. Okay, so the root of sane is Latin, which means sanus, S-A-N-U-S, which means healthy. So really the question that we're asking here is, how do we stay healthy in an unhealthy world? And that's what we're seeing happening like all around us. Things that are like so acute. It's like kind of like when you have a sickness or you have a disease in your body, but it's kind of manageable, and then it becomes acute and it just flares up and it's crazy painful. That is where we're at right now in our world. And so we are seeing all of this unhealthy stuff come to the surface, which I remember saying about a decade ago, I'm like, until the unhealthy stuff comes to the surface, we can never actually really heal. And that's not my wisdom. I mean, that is wisdom I've learned from all of my different teachers. And it's just kind of, it's also self-love, and love 101. We have to be able to acknowledge things in order to actually heal them. And so, what do you and I do in the meantime? Because here's the thing, we're not going to wake up in a month and it's going to be over. We are in the transformation. How long it goes for? It kind of depends. You have to kind of think of it. You don't have to kind of think of it, but one way to think of it is like waves. And it's kind of like if you've ever surfed or you've been in the ocean before, like there's calm and then there's like, holy moly, hang on, here comes a big wave. And our job, what keeps us sane and healthy, is to stay on our surfboards, and if we fall off, to get back on as soon as we can. And to also, don't be a dummy pants and go surfing in waters that, will churn you up and burn you up and spit you out the other side. But also know that we are riding individual waves together, and we are also riding collective waves together. So, to make this easy for you to remember, I'll also put this in the show notes, of course, and on the Feminine Wisdom Cafe, where we post up every month and every week, remember the podcast. So you can always go there and find them on the Feminine Wisdom Cafe, and they're all organized by topic. So it's really easy to find them. I started them all with C's, okay? C's. So it'll be easy to remember. So the first one is create. And if you have a piece of paper, I would really encourage you to write this down because it'll help it get into your brain and your being in a different way. So the first one is create. And the teaching is very simple. In order for us, as we go through this, if you do not use your energy and your life force to create, to be in creative expression, and it doesn't have to be art, it can be art, but needing to create, you're gonna get pulled down or you're gonna get swirled around. And so just asking yourself right now on a scale of 0 to 100, how creative are you feeling? How much are you creating that isn't just about, oh my God, how do I keep everything sustained? Or how am I going to deal with everything else? How much space and time and energy do you have for creativity and creating? And I'm going to kind of separate those a little bit. If you didn't listen to the podcast that I did with my friend Shiloh, Sophia McLeod, who founded the intentional creativity movement. Well, she didn't found it. She created the museum, and she comes from a lineage of people who've been teaching it for many, 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 many decades. Take a listen to that. Think of it this way. So create and creation, it's an energy. And because of the churn and the turn and the topsy-turviness that's going on in our world right now, if you don't move that energy through you, it will come out sideways as anxiety or as frustration and anger. We've talked about this a lot. If we talk about fire and water and emotions and the elements, some people goes more towards depression and the water. So it's stagnant, it's depression, it's despair, it's anxiety, or well, more fire is anxiety. Or you go to anxiety and frustration and anger and lashing out. You don't even know why you're doing it, right? So those are poles, like those are polarities that pull you out of being able to stay healthy. So one way to actually move that energy through you is to create. Now that could be like, I'm just going to go paint something. I'm going to go draw something. But it could also just be like one of the things I do is when I feel anxiety in my body, I create a ritual. I create an altar. I create I like go and I light candles. I go around my house and I put flowers up. I just did this yesterday. It was part of what I did on a Saturday is I went around the house and I took down all the flowers that had died and I gave the water and out, to all my plants. And then I grow dahlias here on the island. I love them. They're as big as your head and they make me so happy. Flowers, open hearts, good to have in your house right now. And I took those and I put them into different vases all around the house. And then I went outside and I tended my garden that I created at Beltane this year, which has these fun stakes I painted that say joy, co-create, and prosper on them. And I planted a little patch of magenta flowers in there. And then I cut out all of the dead herbs that had died because of the heat while I was in California. That was me creating. I was using my energy to do that. So one other way to look at this is we are in this I've talked about this a couple times, but let me have you draw this out and kind of think about this. And any of you that have listened to the Sacred Transformation podcast series I did last year will remember this. For those of you that haven't, do go back and listen to it. But let me give you this perspective. So if you draw the triangle, this is called the triangle of transformation. Okay. And so there are three things that we are all experiencing individually, collectively, and organizationally right now. On the left, the bottom left of the triangle is healing and releasing the past. On the right of the triangle is sustain and preserve in the now. And at the top of the triangle is create and lead the new. This is part of why it's so bloody stressful. And I think I just said the word bloody stressful because I'm I'm watching Ted Lasso right now. Have you all seen Ted Lasso? I have this thing about I don't watch a lot of TV, but when I find a good show that was just given to me by the second practice I'm going to talk to you about, which is about conversations with wise conscious people who recommended the show, and it's set in England. So that's why I think I just said I've never said the word bloody. Like I'm from England, so that makes me laugh. Or from the UK. Okay, so back to triangle of transformation. This is what happens when I'm here with you all on a Sunday. Apparently, I'm really just drinking bubble water. Other thing, it's not in here, y'all. Well, actually, it's at the end. We have to lighten up. Part of what we have to do to be able to stay healthy in this insane world is to be able to laugh. I was just doing a session with a dear client, and I read her to start us off. She just had a really intense week, so I read her a fairy tale. I'm not kidding, from this really awesome book I have about these different beings who are coming together to create a new dream coat for the world. And so we started off by reading this tale about this one. She was a flower fairy, and her name was like Fairy Fluffenwinkle, something I can't remember. And this book was written by my teacher Ariel Spilsbury. It's called Gaia's New Dream Coat. And so it's it's amazingly metaphoric, but it has all these crazy words in it. And this flower fairy, her dealio is she brings the laughter box with her, and she puts the laughter box into the light loom. And the light loom is basically how we create the new. So in this triangle of transformation, it's the top of the triangle. So all these different magical beings are all with high consciousness coming in, each putting in something different. Well, Fairy Fluffenwink, the flower fairy, she brings the laughter box. And it talks all about lightness and, using laughter and smile and lightness to be able to fluff us up, because otherwise we're just going to drown in the heaviness. And so that is actually another practice, is that we need to have this permission to laugh and to lighten up. And that's part of what creativity can give us. Actually, all of these different things that I'm sharing today can do just that. They lighten us up. So if you look at that triangle of transformation, if you're only focused on healing and releasing the past, which is you're gonna go down, you're gonna get sucked down into the despair vortex. If you only focus on preserving and stabilizing in the now, it's like that Hopi elder poem I talk about often, or not poem, but the message of there's a great river that's coming and you can't stop it. Do not hold on to the shore. Let go, let go, let go, and let the river carry you. And it's like if all you do is preserve and try to stabilize the now, it's like you're gripping on to that tree and you're gonna get effed up. You're gonna swallow a lot of water, and it's gonna bang you around, and there's gonna be suffering in there. And if you try to just only do both, you're just gonna get stuck. Now, we're all still releasing and healing from the past. And you can do that for suffering, or we can do it through consciousness and joy. We all need to be sustained and preserve in the now. Like that's important too, so that we don't, as I like to call, just burn down your tree and restart over again. You want to be smart and wise and keep what's needed and release what's no longer needed so that you can lighten up. But this create piece that goes up on top, create and lead to the new. That's where the momentum comes from. That's where the energy comes from. That's where it's like, oh, like something is happening here. Now, you can't just be up there either. Some people are like, I don't want to heal and release the new. They don't want to have to go and look at the heal and the release the past. That's wasn't working, is not working, right? and they just want to get to that stabilize, preserve and stabilize the now. And they're missing also the create and lead the new. So if you're here with me, you are a creator. You are a maker. But just take a pause right now and say, where is my creative energy wanting to go? And that could just be, I just had lunch with a dear friend. She just had her second child, and she's putting her creative energy into motherhood, expressly 100% for the next 3.5 months. And then she's going to reemerge and decide where she wants to go from there. But she's giving that gift to herself. So it doesn't have to look like something out there you produce and make for the world. It has many different flavors. It's your creativity. How do you want to use it? And make sure it's moving. And that brings us to the second point, the second practice, which is conversate and counsel. So write that down. Conversate and counsel with conscious people who can really listen and reflect, and limit your intake and interactions with those who can't. And by limit, I actually do mean limit the amount of time you spend with people who just can't listen, are at a different level of consciousness that is a lower vibration of fear and blame and shame and power over. And also just limiting what you let them into within you. You can still have a very loving relationship with somebody, but you don't talk about certain things. And for those of you who've ever done the love rings, which we teach in the Path to Self-Love Essentials class that we're running in September, it's a great tool to help you understand the different kinds of intimacy and connection. So everyone gets love, but some people who are farther out on the rings, you don't let them in to the inner places, because you're going to get walloped, or it's going to create dissonance in the field. And that doesn't mean you're being a chicken shit, or that you're not being truthful, not having your voice. It just means sometimes you're being wise, because nothing's going to come out of it. And it goes back to where I started earlier when I said, okay, I don't like what I'm seeing in the field. How am I going to respond? What's my part? And part of that is this conversation you and I are having right now. I don't need to go straight at the hornet's nest. I don't want to step in that hornet's nest. I'm just going to get stung with all the other crazy. They're not even like happy bees, like they're mean bees. I love the bees. I'm going to go over here to this hive, we call them in Empower Time, with people who do want to do it differently, and we're doing our best. Doesn't mean we don't sometimes get stung or sting somebody else, but then we're like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Let me take a moment and regroup and recenter. And so who do you have? Here's the thing, you have to have these people in your life. So on a scale of 0 to 100, how strong is your counsel? How strong is your community? How strong are the relationships that you have that you can conversate and counsel in with people who can really listen and also reflect your truth? Because this is the thing, we're going to have disturbances. Sometimes they come from the outside, sometimes they come from the inside. And this next practice I'm going to share with you is partly how you stop allowing the outside to amplify your inner doubt and confusion. So for example, 0 to 100, just rate it and be honest about it. It's okay. Like if you're like, I'm an 85, awesome. I just want to acknowledge that you have put energy there. This is my friend Orna and Matthew Walters. They teach relationships, romantic relationships, and they work with a lot of women who are really high achieving women who also want to create a relationship. And they always say their company's name is actually Love on Purpose. And the same thing with my friend Shasta Nelson, who has done lots of work on friendship and women's friendship. She's like, they both say the same thing. Friendships don't just happen. Romantic relationships don't just happen. You have to put energy over there. You have to create space for it. You have to say, like, this matters to me. And then we have to get over our fear of rejection. We have to, put ourselves out there. And remember, I told you about my little secret tool that I use of the Wise Woman Tea, where I invite people to have Wise Woman Tea with me, and or Wise Being Tea, and that, however it might be. And I've maintained, retained, reconnected so much by using that one simple tool. And so and if you're lower on that, like the conversate and counsel, well, great. This is an area to focus on. This is one of my elevation projects for the year. Every year in my leadership councils, we choose an elevation project. And one of my elevation projects is to connect with other conscious beings who are here on what I call Team Reimagine and Team Redesign, and changing the way we in the world work. And because that helps me, I need that for myself. And so I have a really amazing network of personal people to support me in that. As I've been making my decision around home, I have had mental disturbance, and I don't, I did a pretty solid practice, but it's a catalyst, as we talked about last week. It's a catalyst area for me. And so those catalyst areas, they're going to mess with you. They're going to create disturbance within you. And then if there's anything going on in the external world, that will amplify it. So I literally talked to Shasta on Wednesday. I had another call with another friend on Sunday. I have another Wise Woman Council this Wednesday. And then I'm married to a person, my beautiful partner, Noah, who, really listened to me. And it really helped. It took 4 of them to be able to help me, kind of get to what was really going on and causing that disturbance within me. And I also know I need more of that with the other leaders in the world that are really reimagining and redesigning. And so that is part of what I'm focused on, because I know if I don't create the space in my life, it's not going to happen. So you can also look at it personal and also professional. And what do you need? And just know that it's just part of it. Okay, Christina's saying conversating and counsel. Oh, this is the other thing I want to say about this. The answers and the path and the wisdom for how we create from here. So whether it is the new, leading and creating the new, or how to stay sustained in the now, or even making sure we're not making choices and decisions from the wounds of the past, but instead from wholeness, the wholeness that that comes from our past, requires us to be in conversation. It's actually in counsel. It's actually how we're creating the new and how we're finding the solutions. This is the design as far as I can see it. We can't just read a book. We can't just think about it in our own heads. That will make us insane. It's not mental. We actually have to verbalize it. We have to have this dialogue between each other and amongst each other. And from that, the solutions emerge. Our consciousness awakens. It literally is a practice to conversate and counsel. And I'm seeing it again and again and again. Like I mentioned lunch with a dear friend, and we are talking something out, right? So we would say, we're talking it out, we're talking it through. And I'm listening and I'm holding space and I'm doing my best to stay open. And we're in the space while I was having a glass of rosé. And through that conversating, which is like a verb now, and that counseling around this part, the wisdom emerges. We didn't come to an answer, but she had something to contemplate and chew on. So take a breath. I think this is so exciting. This is part of what keeps me having joy and hope and faith. That it's like through our connection and through our conversations, which is what we do here. All right, last 2. These are related. So here's another C, practice 3. Center and connect every morning to your core. Center and connect every morning to your core. So I'm just going to ask you this point blank, straight out. Do you have a daily morning practice you are doing every morning that is connecting you to your physical body and the physical earth? That's the south. To spirit, the universe, the force, whatever you want to call it. I call it your divine downline. That's the north. That creates your vertical line. For those of you who have overwhelmed and over it, go to the chapter, the Liberate Your Liberate Your Life Force chapter. In the Daring Act of Liberation, you will find a glyph that shows exactly what I'm talking about, the 4 points of connection. That's your vertical line. And that vertical line goes from the top of your head, down through your throat, down through your heart, down through your navel, and down all the way through your sacral and your perineum, and right down like a tail into the ground like roots. If you do not set that center point, that vertical center point every day, you are going to be like a windsock without a pole, which means you're going to react to all of the chaos around you or whatever the emotional field is around you. Don't do that, okay? Don't do that. You want to set both of these points, and that sense, that whole center point that keeps you body, mind, heart, and spirit centered. And there's practices in the Overwhelmed and Over It book. There's practices all throughout the podcast here. You can go to, I think it's dailyflowpractice.com, and I have a video on there that has practices plus a little book. So there's lots of resources. This is part of what I do and share all these practices. And you may already have some. So if you already have that practice, great. My question to you is it enough? Or do you need more right now? So I just mentioned, I'm doing a 40-day practice with one of the feminine leadership councils that I run, that I've been running for about 5 years. And we do this every so often as we do a 40-day practice together. We pick a mantra, we all do it. We do it once a day. And then we use a technology called Voxer, which is an audio messaging platform. And we all chime in like day 15, day 15. And it's so powerful because we're all committed to doing it. And then we're being supported in the practice. And so I need that right now as I'm making these choices about moving and where I'm going to live and making this transition, which is not just about, where am I going to live? It's about where are Noah and I going to root so that we can create this next phase of our life and live our sacred work in the world and give our gifts and also create lives that really sustain each one of us personally and collectively. So I amped up my practice right now, and it'll take me right about through equinox. So if you do have something you're doing, is it enough? Is it enough? And is it hitting all 4 points? The other 2 points, the horizontal line, what I call the heart line. And that is your self-love practice, the things that you're doing that are really about your self-compassion, your self-empowerment, your self-acceptance. There's the receiving practice that I teach a lot about, really asking yourself where your life force is every day and what you need to receive that day and making sure you get that no matter what. It's a simple practice. There's so many, many more. I mean, there's so many self-love practices that I've developed over the last decade that are so simple and they make such a difference. And I always say, don't mistake simple for insignificant. So that's one simple one. There's also the self-compassion soak. Before you get out of bed in the morning, asking yourself, what do I need to hear today? That really will settle your heart. And you just put your hand on your heart and you take a couple breaths and you ask yourself that question, what do I need to hear today? And that voice of that compassionate mother, grandmother, best friend, your inner wisdom will tell you what you need to receive and what you need to hear. And then you remember that and you take it with you. And you know what you've just done? You've centered and connected to your heart. And the same thing is on the other side of that heart line is receiving love from others. So are you connecting to that love line? I don't care if it's your dog, your cat, it could be a stuffed animal, just someone, people you live with, someone who's kind and loving. And all of those centers and connection points every morning, if you can, before you connect with the outside world. I do some wellness coaching for an organization in Los Angeles, and I work with a lot of women in their 20s and men too, different ages. But I was talking to a young woman the other day and I asked her what was the first thing she did, the first 3 things she interacted with in the morning. And she's like, as soon as I wake up, I'm like, what do you do? She's like, I start working. So she's working from home and her office is in her bedroom. And like, she's like, she even admitted sometimes even before I've, gone to the bathroom and brushed my teeth. This is not surprising to me. This is why I wrote Overwhelmed and Over It. I've been teaching this work for so long, and yet it's better, but it's like really the first, so she's like, I can't do the first hour not interacting with the outside world. I'm like, okay, first 30 minutes, just the first 30 minutes. So that would be my double jog dare to you all, is before you interact with the outside world, make sure you're connected to all 4 of those points and that you do not interact with the outside world, including Facebook, email, internet, whatever, until you've done those connection points. Less than 11 minutes. And you're like, I got to drive my kid to school. Okay, no problem. But you can do that self-compassion soak right from bed before you wake up. You can take a walk outside and put your feet on the ground and take a breath. And if you can't put your feet on the ground, put one hand on your belly, one hand on your heart, and just breathe and say, I have a body. Spirit, easy. Say super easy prayer. Divine, play me like a finely tuned instrument in your orchestra. That will connect you to spirit. Pull an oracle card. That opens you up to spirit. It's always right there for you. And then love from others, it's easy. Hug your kid, hug your dog. Look at a text from someone that was loving, I have a stuffed polar bear in my bed. So those are very simple. That would be enough. And then when you come back home, really then take a centering point. Okay, last one. C, clear your field daily and weekly. Clear your field. That's your energy field, your psychic field, your subtle field, your physical field, your mental field. You got to clear it out. You got to lighten up. And daily and weekly. So some of you have heard me talk about the power of downshifting, the practice of downshifting. If you have the Overwhelmed and Over It book, it's in there. It's in the section on liberating your time. And I think there might also be in section liberate section 4 and section 2. If you don't have Overwhelmed and Over It, go get it. Go get it. It was written for these times right now. And so think about your day right now. And what are you doing at the end of the day to clear your field? To let go of everyone else's stuff, to let go of the stress, to let go of the to-dos. And think about the end of your week. So when I think of a week, and I just actually had the young woman who I did the session with, I had her, we were on the phone, and I said, okay, I want you to draw a line, and just draw a straight line with an arrow. So think of that, you all. Straight line with an arrow, that's your week, Sunday through Saturday. And in the world of time, that's how we live our life. We push through to the end of the week, and then we fall over. And then I said, draw this shape. So imagine the shape, a rainbow. And this is the shape of your day. This is the shape of your week. So we're supposed to rise, to shine, hit the apex in the middle of a day, and then come down and downshift. Same thing with your week. You want to rise, slow start Monday, take a breath on Wednesday somehow. That's why I have my space mornings on Wednesday, and then downshift. And so you need to have something as you go down that week to release the world. So for me, Saturdays are what I call no mind Saturdays. I am not allowed to think of anything of significance and consequence. I can have significance, but not consequence. So I'm not allowed to strategize. I don't work on Saturdays. They're my Sabbath days. And I'm really just because my mind needs a break. Because otherwise I'm going to be insane. Mental disturbance. Our minds need to settle. Our emotional hearts need to settle. Our nervous systems need to settle. That is normal. We're so conditioned. And when I talked to this young woman, she's been working like an arrow in the productivity machine for so long that her nervous system doesn't know how to downshift. When I first realized this for myself, I remember trying to sit down on the couch and do nothing, and I literally started to twitch. I think I told you about a yin yoga class that I took my good friend to, who also on the, single mother, 2 children, entrepreneur, and also has a lot of mental chatter in her head. Took her to a yin yoga class, and her nervous system couldn't slow down. Like she was going to run out of the room. She didn't, and now she's she's a yin yoga convert. And so it takes time to reestablish a different rhythm, but that's the gift of where we're at right now. The world has been out of whack for a long time. In the way we work, in the way we operate, the planet is literally burning out. We are at the point that has been prophesized for a long time. And the wisdom teaching is clear. If we are going to move out of this without complete destruction, It will be an awakening of consciousness, because consciousness locks us in to realities that we assimilate into. What Clarissa Pinkola calls that overculture. And like at the beginning of Overwhelmed and Over, I talk about how we've become fishies, and fish bowls, and we don't even realize that we're in fish bowls and we're not free. And so we don't have to be scared of that. We don't have to be taken down by it. We don't have to hold our breath for it. And I'm not saying that this is all, well, it can be all daisies, but I don't mean that in a Pollyanna kind of way. I mean, like how we walk through this threshold. John O'Donohue talks about this. You've heard me read his poem, Thresholds. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google John O'Donohue Thresholds. Times of threshold crossings are dangerous times. And in those times, we need blessings, we need practices, and we need each other more than ever. And so I'm going to end us with two things. Number one, I just want to first of all say a shout out to Sarah L. I do go on and read these reviews, and they help other people find us. So if you can rate, review, and share this podcast with another woman or being, that would be great. And here's what Sarah L. posted. Christine invites us to commit to practices that help us cultivate an elevated reality within our hearts, so that the individual choices we make in our own lives can shift the unsustainable systems we live in. I tune into her podcast to learn about the systems I live in and to remind myself why I practice what I practice. And so, Sarah, thank you for that. And also thanks for all your participation in the Feminine Wisdom Cafe. And I want to just say that's it right there. These practices, you all, we're human. We're going to have emotion. We're going to have disturbance. It's how we move through it, so that we can be and influence the systems that we live in, not by raging, not by ranting, not even by having to social network and post and blah, blah. I mean, it has its place, but by just doing it and being willing to actually say no more to that and to show a different way. It's in you, it's in me, and we will do this together. And then one last part here, Nance has a question. So this is one of the inquiries that came from the survey. And she asks, and this is relevant to what we're talking about today, what do you feel is the most important thing you do to stay centered or to help you return to feeling centered? So the most important thing I do to stay centered is I do a daily morning practice every morning that I do not leave the house without. It varies. Sometimes it's 3 minutes, sometimes it's 30 minutes. But the one thing I always make sure that I do is I do my life force reading and what I need to receive that day, because it helps me know where I am. And I also do the 4-hour practice, which is root down, rise up, relax back, and receive, which is making sure I'm hitting all those 4 points of connection. And so if I do that, and I do it in different ways on different days, then I do stay centered. And sometimes, like I said, it is only 3 minutes, but more often, I'll say the last thing too I want to say about that, the other thing I do to stay centered is I do pranayama. So I do a lot of breath work in my practice, which sometimes just looks like a minute of breath of fire. I have a couple different yoga techniques for those of you that did the Stay Harmonized practices. I'm going to go back and find those videos so I can share them with everybody, but they're simple practices and they clear my field and they clear my mind and they clear my emotions. And I always make sure that every day I touch into, in that practice, what's called the click. So I love this teaching. You don't have to meditate for 60 minutes. You just need to be able to touch and feel that center and that connection to yourself, to your body, to spirit, whatever that is for you, and to others that are here with you. That's why I call it the 4 points of connection. And what do I do to help me return to feeling centered? I breathe. It really is the breath. And when I notice, I go more towards frustration and anger, and I slow down and I breathe. And then I ask myself, what's going on inside of there, Christine? I notice when I am over on the fire side, or I'm over on the emotional, on the sad kind of despair side, and I get curious about what's going on inside of me. And I talk to my heart and I talk to my soul. And usually there's an answer in there. And if I can't find it, I conversate and I counsel, sending you all off with much love. And thank you for willing to do things differently and to be the most pure hearted, truthful, powerful, grounded, rooted presence you can be in this world. Never doubt your presence is enough to change this world, and it is. Much love.
Okay, wise beings, there was so much juicy wisdom in there. And what I love about this conversation are all the fun and simple, yet mighty practices that Christine shared. So, just recapping the 4 C's for you here, we have create, conversate and counsel, center and connect to your core, and clear your field. And we'll put those in the show notes, don't worry, as well as links to some of the specific practices within each C. And I love all of these. And over the years, I've played with them as daily, weekly, and monthly practices. But there's one I'd like to highlight for you today, and that's conversate and counsel. I have several dear beloved one-on-one relationships with wise beings where we conversate on a regular rhythm. And we've created intentional space together. And let me tell you, it's game changing. I don't know how I would have made it through these past 7, 10, 12 years without these sacred spaces of conversation. So, I'd like to invite you today to expand and play with this practice of conversating and counsel. Are you game? I'm inviting you to invite one person to a wise being tea this week. And the tea doesn't need to happen this week, but do make the invitation and create the space together. And just as a reminder, a wise being tea is simply this type of conscious and intentional space. It can be a in real life tea date with someone, with a beloved, or it can be virtual as well. Mine are usually virtual because I happen to live in a different country than pretty much all of my beloveds. So that's a wise being tea, and that's your dare is to go ahead and schedule one this week, because the future is collective. If we're going to evolve and shift, we're going to do it in community. And as Christine said today, we can't just read a book. We can't just ruminate in our minds in isolation. We need each other, because a beautiful thing about humanity is that we can be mirrors for each other. When we come together in conscious connection, we amplify the ability to access our own inner wisdom. We can do this for each other. And another way to be connected in community is through our Feminine Wisdom Cafe. We're linking it in each episode in the show notes, and it's hosted on Mighty Networks, which is a space outside of social media, and that was chosen with intention. So all you do is click the link in the show notes, create your account, and you're in. So I invite you, choose one of the practices from today's podcast to play with, and join us in the Feminine Wisdom Cafe to share about your experience. We'll even put an extra post up this week in the cafe to create a space to share about your morning or evening practice. Consider it a special cozy corner of the cafe with comfy sofas and fuzzy magenta pillows where fellow wise beings are gathered to share and witness each other. Doesn't that just sound inviting? And we can do this, you all. We can create this space and these spaces together. And that's how shift happens, again, in community. And that, wise beings, is our inquiry for the week. What practices are you playing with to stay centered? And how do you feel as a result of playing with these practices? So I hope to see you on the Feminine Wisdom Cafe. Christine and I are both there, so you can connect with us and share about your experience. You can ask questions, even share with us how this season of light is landing for you. We would love to hear from you. And then join us next time for the next episode in the season of light. Looking forward to being with you all again. Sending you all off with much love.